Howdy, Compelled Unbeliever here. Today I'm here to talk about Mr. Brass in his video, Does the Bible Promote Sexism? Part 1. Now, Mr. Brass is a very interesting fellow. He is a deist, and that's kind of different in the atheist Christian community. He gives us a voice that we normally wouldn't have. So I highly recommend his channel, and there will be a link to his channel in the description down below. In this particular video, I'm doing this completely off the cuff. I don't have a script. I'm just going through this video and just expressing my thoughts as they come to me. So, and the reason is for this is I want to show how easy these arguments are to dispute. So let's just take a look at the arguments and see why they don't work. I do want to make one more note. This is not anything against Mr. Brass. I do highly respect him. I think these particular ideas and these apologetics are very bad ones. And I do want to make that distinction. It just got real. Purpose of presentation. So this slide basically tells us what he wants to do in this. I want to jump down to the last bullet point. Spread the good news of Christ and God's Word. Now, as a deist, that is one who believes that God or the gods are not actively involved in the affairs of man. Christians believe that he is. That's exactly what the Bible is all about, telling us how God is involved in the affairs of man. So in this slide, I had a little exchange with him, trying to figure out where he was coming from. I still don't understand where he comes from. Sexism origins comes from 1960s feminism movement. The first time the word was recorded in print was in Caroline Bird's On Being Born Female. Was used as a comparison to racism. Well, actually, yeah, I can see that. But let's go back to the first two bullet points, particularly the second one. Just because a word is made up to describe something does not mean that that did not exist before there was a word to describe it. We have germs. Before someone came up with the word germs, germs did in fact exist. Someone came up with a word to describe it. So already we're really kind of going down the slippery slope of apologetics that are just really weak. So now we have the definitions of sexism. I really don't have a problem with these definitions. I can accept them. Let's just go move right along. Claim 1. Women sub to men. I don't know what sub is supposed to mean, if it's subservient or substandard to men. Suppose a problem. The first issue we have here is the bullet point. When we use the word supposed, we are undermining the idea that it is a problem. So we're already seeing a bias here. So, and I really like to see this kind of thing in writings, particularly historical writings, because then we have a window into the mind of the author and we understand their bias. So Genesis 3:16 says, women will suffer for great birthing pain due to Eve's disobedience to God, and they will be ruled over by men. Now, I don't know where these contentions, which would be a much better word instead of supposed problem, come from. I don't know if these are made up by the authors or what, but I will accept them as contentions. So let's go to the solution. Both were punished, but in two different areas, men on the work level and women at the home level. A power struggle is at play, and the women being ruled by men isn't ideal, as scholars note originally in 2:4 through 3? Oh, no, 2:4 and 3:12. I imagine this is supposed to be Genesis. I did look at the Genesis reference here, and there is nothing that indicates the sexes were equal. Nothing at all. If this is Genesis that they're trying to cite here, No, they're just completely wrong. Disobedience is what changes it at all. Okay, disobedience doesn't have anything to do with sexism. That's a problem in itself. Let's go back to men on the work level and women at the home level. Okay, this is kind of a glaring problem here. We're already making gender roles and assigning women to the home because, I don't know, maybe they just can't work. And if anybody's ever had children, male or female, maintaining a home, taking care of the bills, getting the laundry, all the things that are necessary is hard work. So, yeah, this is sexist. It's not a good argument. Next bullet point. I take a mix of Walter Brueggemann, hopefully I said that right, and Matthew Lynch's view, where Adam will work hard and Eve will crave intimacy with him only for it not to be completely met due to him having to support her. I don't even see how this is an argument. Claim 2, a lot of sexism. Genesis 19 features Lot giving up his virgin daughters to a mob, impregnates his daughter. Lot's wife gets turned into a pillar of salt. Solution. Lot was shaming the mob as they wanted the men for sex and not virgin girls. Okay, Genesis 19 does not even begin to suggest this. So, we're just pulling crap out of our butts here. Okay? I don't even see, I would be embarrassed to make this argument. Lot was raped by his daughters. Yep, he was. And their children would grow up to be enemies of their people. Pillar of salt is just a figure of speech, which means his wife got turned into ash from the fire. Okay, Lot's wife was with Lot and his 2 daughters, and they didn't get hurt at all, but she got turned into ash. Really? Really? So God just picked out one person to turn into ash from the fire? I don't think so. Bad argument. If anything out of this episode, Lot suffered more because he wasn't turned into ash, because I have no clue what you're trying to say here. Moving right along. Judah mistakenly... Okay. Claim 3. Judah and Tamar. Judah mistakenly slept with his daughter-in-law, Tamar, thinking she was a prostitute, thus impregnating her, and later tried to get her killed, and he wasn't threatened with punishment. Now, they don't address the first part of this, so I'm going to have to. Judah mistakenly slept with his daughter-in-law, thinking she was a prostitute. Now, men were allowed to sleep with prostitutes. Women were not. That is sexist. But we don't address this in the solution. Both looked bad here. Tamar took advantage of a widower, and Judah failed to give her the security she needed by marrying her off to his son. Okay, just the whole concept, the whole idea that he was supposed to marry her off. Why? Because she was property. She didn't have a choice, but he failed to treat her like property and marry her off. Okay, I wouldn't put this in the good argument section, okay? It's a bad argument. Judah was never said to be a perfectly moral man, and Tamar knew the consequences her actions could bring. 38:26. Once again, I get what are they citing here? What book? I'm pretty sure this is Genesis, and I'm not even going to look it up because it's funny. Anyway, 38:26 has Judah admitting he's more to blame for it. Well, yeah, he was sleeping around with the prostitute. prostitute, or what he thought was a prostitute, and she turned out to be his daughter-in-law. And yeah, pretty much a bad picture. And yeah, maybe it was bad of her to do this, but the thing is this is still based on sexism. She was a prostitute. We don't have any references to male prostitutes being okay in the Bible, because women could not sleep around with whoever the heck they wanted to. Men could. So, that argument fails. Next claim. Claim 4, sexist slavery. Exodus 21:3-4 has women and children considered property, and their personal happiness is shown not to matter. I'm going to take this even further on this argument. It's throughout the Old Testament. Okay? When a woman is raped, their violation is never even considered. It is never spoken about. It is never addressed in any way, shape, or form, because women are property like a cow, as I've said in my other video. So, yeah, it was horrible. Indentured servitude. Oh, come on. Now we're getting into indentured servitude. Indentured servitude is something else. Now we're trying to minimize what slavery is. And even if we take indentured servitude, that is slavery. It's voluntary, but it is still slavery. And that's not cool. So we're saying, well, this was just a slave by choice. Yeah, a sex slave or whatever by choice. Not cool. Moving right along. This is talking about siring relationships, also known ones meant to produce children for the house, which is a much needed resource. Okay, now we're talking about women being resources. Yes, like a cow. You know, you got the sheep, you got the cows out there, you got the goats, you got the chickens, and you got them women, and don't forget the broodmares. The broodmares and them women, they're pretty much the same thing, because, you can get them all impregnated, and then you can make more kids and everything's all good because you get more money. Really? Come on. That's it's not a solution. That is a horrible. When the solution is worse than the claim, it's not good. Ancient Near East relationships were like business. Oh my goodness. So now we're talking about marrying people as business arrangements. And I will concede that is how it was. That does not justify the degradation of women. You see this? It is not justified. Where they were arranged and love had to be acquired during the marriage. Oh, so they were married off to someone against their choice. They had no choice in who they were going to be married off to. And I imagine sometimes they could have had some choice, but they were still property and they were to be married off by their fathers. That is sexism. The last bullet point, thank goodness. The sexism charge has no basis, as this was a group affair, with no one getting a clear upper hand. Yeah, I think they did. What was being sold, we're using the word sold, wasn't them as persons. So now they're not even persons. They're not even people. They're not even human beings. They're just labor output. Wow. Is that not sexism? Mr. Brass, I think you're a great guy, but just don't do Christian apologetics. You're making yourself look worse. Let's see if we can stand Claim 5. Claim 5. Sexist slavery again. Yeah, it's again and again and again and again and again and again and again in the Old Testament. Jesus actually gives us rules about how we're supposed to be slaves. Not cool. But anyway, I digress. Solution. As Daniel Snell points out, this wasn't done because of a bias towards one's sex, but rather because the parents were in deep poverty and seeing giving up the girl as a means of giving her a better life. Now, there is no even the beginning of a suggestion of this in the Bible. Ever. 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 There is nothing that says anything about giving a girl a better life. Now, who is going to benefit from this? Well, the father. The father's family. He gets money for a girl, for his daughter. That's not sexist. He wasn't selling boys. Because boys were not considered property. They were free men. But women were. And this is sexist. The girl's rights would be equal to that of a free woman. So there was no degradation of the woman in the process. Okay, slave, free. Slave, free. Now, in this respect, she is still owned as property now, not by her father, but by her husband. She is still property. She is still owned. So, that is degradation of the woman. There was no woman that owned a man in the entire Bible. Ever. That is sexism. And I would be ashamed to have put out this slide. Claim 6, man's wives. Exodus 21:10 has God permitting men to have many wives and sets up laws on how they should be treated. That's very true, and it's over and over again in the Old Testament. But what we never ever see is women being able to have many husbands because they were not considered to be equal. Sexism. Solution. These weren't wives. Okay, so now we're just going to say they weren't wives. Okay, but concubines, which was used to populate the household, which had benefits to all parties, such as giving women support. No sexism is but merely economics and social conditioning. So, we're talking about economics here. We're not talking about a human being's feelings, thoughts, or emotions. We're not talking about whether she had a choice. We're just talking about economics and social conditioning. Just because a society is sexist or racist does not make it right. So it's not a solution at all. They were pretty much second wives, with the only real difference being that the children produced by them wouldn't be in line for inheritance unless they were promoted up by men. Okay, see, here we go again. Your apology is horrible. They weren't promoted up by women, they were promoted up by men. This is sexism. How can you not see this? Claim 7, length of purification. Leviticus 12:1-8 says that a mother has to purify twice as long when having a girl than having a boy, thus sexist. I agree. Solution. We may not know exactly. We don't know exactly why this happened, but there are far more natural, non-sexist reasons than sexist reasons, such as believing postnatal discharge was longer for women. Okay, men didn't have postnatal discharge, if that's what you're saying. If you're saying that postnatal discharge is longer for a female child, that's caca, poo-poo, okay? Human beings have been having babies ever since we've been human beings. And we all know, and human beings have all known, that there is not a difference in the gender on how the woman who is giving birth how her body works. That is a horrible, horrible argument. Adopting sexual formation ideas of the sexes from the Greeks because the fact girls would grow to give birth to more sinners. So it's the woman's fault that they're giving birth to sinners, even though, by the way, they had no choice. They had to have sex with their men. That's not sexist, though. Even to have more time to bind with their mother. What? So now little girl babies get more time to, and it's not bind, it's bond, by the way, with their mother. How? And this isn't even an argument. It doesn't even make sense. Ugh. I can't even believe. I hope you people don't watch all of this video. It's too ridiculous. I can't even believe I'm doing this. Claim 8. Women and Blood. Leviticus 15, 19 through 30 and 18, 19 say women who were having their periods should be avoided. Yeah, that's true. Solution. This would only be sexist if the men didn't have to go through the same thing. Which they did in previous 18 verses. Hey, honey, I can't go to the temple. I'm on my period. No, come. Okay, I understand that men, when they touch dead bodies or whatever, they had to go through. They had to go through the purification process to because they were unclean, but they weren't on their period. And the period of time that they were unclean was not the same as for a woman. This is sexist. It just meant you couldn't approach the tabernacle, at least till the Pharaoh made it a bigger deal. And honestly, I don't know what this is a reference to. I'm really curious to know. I've studied Egyptology, and I've studied early Christianity and Judaism for about, 30 years. And avidly, I do claim to be an amateur early Christian historian, and I just don't know what they're talking about. If anyone has any idea, please let me know. I'm curious. Okay, I like the whimsical name of this claim. Claim 9, whip 'em. Leviticus 19:20 has a man whipping a female slave he had sex with, and he gets no punishment. Solution. Okay, first of all, before we even get to the solution, a female slave, keyword, slave, he had sex with. So if she's a slave, by definition, she has no choice whether she gets to have sex with him or not. Even if she's consenting to sex and wants to have sex with them, she is still a slave. A slave. Not the man here. Solution. Relies on... Oh my goodness. Okay, relies on the King James translation, which is different from others. We're gonna mince meat with translations here. I love it. Which put the punishment on both of them. If I had studied this, I would tear this apart just on the translation thing, because I know there are other translations that probably clarify this better. I almost wish I had bothered to study for this one. Really, this was about a man who slept with a slave girl, keyword slave, who was not engaged with a free man. Okay, if she's a... Oh my goodness. And now he has to pay up. So her rape is worth money. And the slave girl was not engaged to a free man. That's probably because she's a slave, okay? There's a difference between a slave and a non-slave. A free woman could be married to a free man, but a slave is still a slave. And both of them, both the slave and the non-slave, if they are the female gender, they are treated like females, which is sexist in the Bible. Shame would be put on both of them. Now, how is shame going to be put on a slave for doing what she has to do as a slave? So there is no better than the other here. I guess we're talking about ethics here. Yeah. First of all, he tolerated the condition of her being a slave, and he forced her to have sex with him. Even if she was consenting, she still didn't have consent. So, no, not a good argument. Claim 10, priest daughter. Leviticus 21:9 has unchaste daughters of priests being burned to death, but not the sons. That's true. Solution: technically, they hung them first. Oh my goodness! I hope that was just an addendum of some sort, because it's not. That doesn't help the problem. If they hung them, that is much longer suffering than burning to death, and I can't imagine how horrible burning to death would be. But it's much longer suffering. When they hung them up, it was while they were alive, so they had to die before they were taken down and finally burned. And I don't even know that this is true. This is a claim, and I just don't even know that it's true that they hung them first. I'm pretty sure it does not say that in the text. This is like saying, because there is a lack of mention of women don't steal sheep in Exodus 22:1, therefore they could do it. It applied to both. Actually, you're just speculating there. In this case, it is the women that were burned, but not the sons. The sons evidently aren't mentioned here. And that's typical, because the sons were able... Oh my goodness, this is just crazy. Also, the women would know what she is doing, and by sleeping outside of controlled situation, she, it's her fault, put a strain on resources and shamed her father, who was a spiritual leader of the community. Okay, so the father is the spiritual leader of the community, not the mother. Sexism. Okay, and now we're putting the blame on her, on the females for this, and not the males involved. That is so not cool. That is sexism. Every one of your apologetics here screams of sexism. Every solution is not a solution, but makes it worse. Ugh. I can't even believe I'm continuing to do this. Leviticus 27:3 through 7 has a woman's life as less than a man's. Solution. This was redemption money and had to do with who was more fit with labor and thus was more useful to society. For society. Okay, so now we're saying that women are less useful for society. Are you trying to suggest that that is not sexist in any way? I really want to know. Under this view, a woman older than her 20s life was worth more than a 5 to 20-year-old men and 60-year-old men. This was no more sexist than the wage gap. Okay, I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. They may be just pulling them out of their patuskis, their keisters. This was no more sexist than the wage gap. So, I will accept the fact that the wage gap is sexist. But this is kindergarten philosophy. Things that you learn at the kindergarten level. Two wrongs do not make a right. If there is a wage gap, and that is sexist today, does not justify or in any way negate sexism in the past. And it definitely does not in any way justify sexism in the Bible. Women and Census. Numbers 1-2 has a pool of men able to fight for war, and women weren't included, meaning women were the weaker sex and thus unable to battle. Now, this is their contention that they made up. I don't know if who exactly would make this argument. Yes, men in general tend to be stronger than women. Traditionally, men have gone to battle as opposed to women, but there have been numerous accounts of women going in there and kicking some man patuski. Okay? So, well, I'm just going to accept this argument as like it's valid or something, and we'll see what the solution is, because I'm sure it's going to be much worse than the claim. Solution. The reason for this is because women were considered valuable oh my goodness. So, women are resources. They're valuable resources. We're not talking about men being valuable resources, because they were the ones who gave birth to children. Yeah, okay, they gave birth to children. They're brood mares. Them women right there, they just got to go get them pregnant, and then they can go have them babies and everything, and hopefully they'll all be boys and everything, because if they're boys, then we can make them into warriors and be a stronger tribe and go kick everybody's butt. Wow. This goes down, is very similar to property rights. It's just horrible. Putting them in harm's way would be disastrous for their society. Look, in general, I think this is the strongest argument that they've made. But why can't you just say that women were valued? That women were valued for who and what they were, for being female, because they're wonderful. That would be my argument if I was pulling crap out of my butt. There were exceptions, as was the case for Deborah, who was a military leader. Okay, yeah. Deborah was a mighty military leader, and that's cool. That's amazing. And I think that's good that you pointed that out. And she was an exemption, and I don't know why. I think it was just the author's wanting to tell a story. I have no idea why that appeared there, but it was an exception to the rule. It was not how women were treated. Women were not at all looked at leaders. So let's just go to the next slide. Oh, thank goodness this is over. Okay, so now we're going back to the argument that the word was just made up in the 60s, therefore sexism didn't exist before the 60s. A horrible argument. While the Bible was written in a patriarchy, okay, keyword patriarchy, okay, that means men were in charge. That's sexist. And it's supposed to say patriarchal society. This was not considered an ideal solution. By whom? Or why was this not considered an ideal situation? That's what they lived in. And who did not consider this to be an ideal situation? I need to reference something, because it's all throughout the Bible. This is how women were treated. Men were in charge. And that is, at one point, they were completely equal. Again, no, they weren't. Never were they completely equal. They were always sexist. You're wrong. Allegations of sexism in the Bible fails to take into account the culture, oh my goodness, no, don't do this, of the ancient Near East and how things happened back then. So, because the culture was sexist, it's okay. You know what, back then they were all sexist, and they just treated them women how they wanted to, but that was way back then, so it's okay, and you know, now you're even weakening your own argument by making this, I can't even call it an argument, by undermining your own argument by saying the culture, it was okay because the culture and people just don't take into account how things happened were back then. Why are you doing this? You've ruined the entire purpose of this video. Just with that one statement. Okay, so the video here ends with their references, which they don't exactly give us footnotes, so we don't know which references go where or anything else. So we would have to read these entire books to figure out what they're trying to say and put it where. But the thing is this entire video was full of bad ideas. If I read these books, and these are the references, they are full of bad ideas. If you take a bad idea and reference it, it is still a bad idea. I have no need or desire to read these references because I already know, that at least if you're citing these properly, or if these are indeed your references, that they're full of bad ideas. The Bible is sexist. Just remember, it's just a book.